Lord have mercy. I never thought I'd get caught up in something like this. It all started on a real lazy Sunday afternoon. Yeah? No. One of them days when the house feels too darn quiet, but still kinda homey. I was just puttering around, trying to keep busy because my mind just wouldn't settle Dodd-Frank, my husband. He took off on a last-minute fishing trip with the boys, leaving the house quiet as a tomb. Mikey, my stepson, bless his heart, he's 23. He was upstairs in his room, could hear the thump-thump of his music. A low rumble drifting down to the kitchen. We don't get the house to ourselves much, but Mikey and me, we always got along. Pretty good. He's a good kid, Mikey is. It's got that young man confidence. But underneath it, you see this sweet side, real tender-like. Over the years, we built up this thing, this quiet understanding. It wasn't no big whoop, no thing flashy, but it was there, steady as a rock. After I finished cleaning up, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, stood by the kitchen window, letting the sun warm me up. That quiet should have been relaxing, but I got this fidgety energy buzzing in my veins. It was one of them feelings that make you want to jump out of your skin. So I figured, why not check on Mikey? His music was playing soft when I got to the top of the stairs. His bedroom door was cracked open just enough for the sound to get out. I stopped, thinking maybe I should knock. Maybe I should just leave him be. But curiosity, I reckon, pushed me forward. I crept closer, gonna call out, but then I saw it through the crack. Mikey was sitting on the edge of his bed, all relaxed but real focused. His hands was moving like he had a purpose. He was looking down, brows furrowed like he was solving one of them riddles. My breath caught in my throat. I realized what he was doing. That part was private, happening right there in front of me. I should have turned away. Should have let him have his space. But I froze, stuck there like a fool, surprised and, well, dang, intrigued. Something about how open he was. How he didn't even know the world existed outside that room. It held me like a spell. The sun was shining in, soft, like a dream, making his face glow, showing the curve of his shoulders. Lord, I knew I shouldn't be there, watching him. But seeing him so unguarded, so real, it stirred up something deep inside me, curiosity. A question I couldn't put into words, something I had to know. Before I knew it, Mikey looked up. His eyes locked on mine through that crack. A time just stopped. His face changed from surprise to something else. Embarrassment, maybe? And a whole lot of uncertainty. He stopped moving his hands. Neither one of us could move. Trapped in this silence that felt like forever. Mikey, I wanted to blurt out, son, I didn't see you. Anything to break the tension, but my words got stuck in my throat. My heart was pounding like a drum solo, echoing in my ears. Mikey moved first. He grabbed a blanket, covered himself up real quick. His face was red as a tomato. I didn't think you'd come upstairs, he mumbled, his voice all low and embarrassed. So, sorry, I blurted out, my own face burning up. I stepped back from the door. Didn't mean to. I didn't know. Words tumbled out of my mouth, but Mikey shook his head, raised his hand like he was stopping me. It's fine, he said quick, but his voice was shakier than a leaf in a hurricane. Give me a minute. I nodded. Back down the hall towards the top of the stairs, my head spinning like a tornado. I shouldn't have stayed. I shouldn't have been watching. But the image of Mikey, so wide open and real, was branded into my mind. I leaned there, gripping the banister, trying to catch my breath. A million thoughts raced through my head, each one messier than the last. I never seen Mikey like that. Before, not just how he looked, but on the inside, something in his face struck a chord. Something I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore either. And I didn't know it then, but this was how the crazy stuff was going to start. The sound of Mikey's door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. He walked into the hallway, real slow and careful, not looking at me. He'd thrown on a t-shirt and shorts, his usual getup, but his red cheeks and stiff posture gave him away. "Sorry about that," he said, his voice quiet as he leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't mean for you to see that." "It's okay," I said quick, my own voice soft as a whisper. "I should have knocked. Wasn't thinking." He nodded, finally looking at me for a second before looking away again. "I guess we're even now," he said with this little nervous laugh. "Even?" I asked, tilting my head, confused. He shrugged, this tiny smile tugging at his lips. "You've walked in on me. I've walked in on you. Remember last summer when you forgot to lock the bathroom door?" The memory hit me like a jolt and my cheeks burned anew. I had completely forgotten about that incident, the fleeting moment of awkwardness that we had laughed off at the time. "I guess you're right," I said with a laugh, though my voice still had a nervous flutter. "We're even." The tension between us seemed to ease slightly, the shared memory acting as a bridge between the awkwardness of the moment and the easy familiarity we'd always shared. But even as we laughed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us, something unsaid, hovering just below the surface, waiting to be talked about. The laughter faded, leaving behind a lingering quiet that felt different than before. Mikey leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed casual over his chest, but his posture had some tension. I was unsure what to say, and for a moment I considered retreating downstairs to give him the space I had so clearly invaded. But something in the way his gaze flitted toward me, hesitant yet searching, kept me rooted in place. It wasn't discomfort exactly. It was something softer, something almost vulnerable that made me want to stay. So I said finally, my voice softer than I intended, "You want to talk about it?" Mikey's eyes widened slightly, his cheeks darkening as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Talk about what, exactly?" he asked, his tone laced with nervous humor. I offered a small smile, hoping to ease the tension. "About anything? You don't have to if you don't want to, but I just thought maybe you'd feel better." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor as he rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know," he admitted after a moment. "It's kind of embarrassing." I took a step closer, keeping my movements slow and deliberate as though I were approaching a skittish animal. "Mikey, it's okay to feel embarrassed. Everyone has moments like that." His lips quirked into a faint, self-deprecating smile. "Not everyone gets caught by their stepmom." The way he said it, half joking, half mortified, made me laugh softly. And, to my surprise, his smile widened just slightly in response. "I guess not," I admitted, leaning against the opposite wall to mirror his posture. "But hey, if it helps, I've been in plenty of embarrassing situations too. You're not alone." Kyle looked up at me then, his expression softening. "Yeah, but you're always so composed, like you have everything together all the time." The comment caught me off guard, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. "I'm not as composed as you think," I said, my voice quieter now. "Trust me, I've had my fair share of moments where I didn't know what I was doing." He studied me for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly as though he were trying to reconcile the image he had of me with the person standing before him. "It's just weird," he said finally, his voice almost contemplative. "You're so different from Dad, not in a bad way, just different." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I settled for a soft, "different can be good sometimes." Kyle nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. "Yeah," he said after a pause, "I guess it can." The silence stretched between us again, but this time it felt less heavy. I could see the tension in Kyle's shoulders easing, the faint lines of worry around his eyes softening as he leaned back against the doorframe. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said after a moment, his tone more sincere now. "I wasn't really thinking. I guess I just forgot you were home." "It's okay," I said quickly, hoping to reassure him. "Really, it's not a big deal. I just want to make sure you're okay." Kyle nodded, though he still avoided my gaze. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just I don't know. It's hard to explain." I tilted my head slightly, My curiosity piqued. Hard to explain how? He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Just ... Being around people is hard sometimes, you know? Like, I always feel like I'm supposed to be a certain way, and when I'm not, it feels like I'm doing something wrong. His words hit me harder than I expected, and I felt a pang of empathy for him. Kyle, I said softly, taking another step closer, you don't have to be anything other than yourself. You don't have to meet anyone's expectations. Not mine, not your dad's, not anyone's. He looked up at me then, his eyes wide and searching, and for a moment I saw the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. You really think that? I know that, I said firmly. You're a good person, Kyle. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. The corners of his mouth twitched into a faint smile, and I could see the tension in his posture easing even further. Thanks, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. You're welcome, I replied, my own voice soft. We stood there for a moment longer. The silence between us feeling almost companionable now. I could see the faint traces of a smile lingering on Kyle's lips, and I felt a sense of relief that he seemed to be feeling better. But even as the tension eased, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, the way he looked at me. The way his gaze lingered just a moment too long made my heart flutter in a way I didn't fully understand. Finally, Kyle straightened up, pushing off the doorframe with a faint sigh. I should probably do something productive, he said, his tone light but tinged with hesitation. Take your time, said with a small smile. You don't have to rush into anything. Me, he nodded, his eyes meeting mine one last time before he turned and disappeared into his room, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Staring at the closed door as a strange mix of emotions swirled within me, I couldn't quite put a name to what I was feeling. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. But I knew one thing for certain, things between Kyle and me would never be quite the same. But what was coming was even crazier. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange haze. I tried to distract myself with small tasks, folding laundry, sorting through the mail, anything that would keep my mind from wandering back to the moment in the hallway. Did the memory of Kyle's expression, the vulnerability in his voice, lingered in my thoughts like a shadow I couldn't shake. I told myself it was nothing, a fleeting moment of awkwardness that we would both move past. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less certain I felt. There was something about the way he'd looked at me, so open, so unguarded, that stirred something deep within me. By the time evening rolled around, I was emotionally drained. I settled onto the couch with a book, hoping to lose myself in the fictional world and escape the whirlwind of my thoughts, but the words on the page blurred together, my attention straying again and again to the closed door at the top of the stairs. The sound of footsteps broke through my haze, and I looked up to see Kyle coming down the stairs. His hair was slightly disheveled, as though he'd been lying in bed. And he had an air of uncertainty about him that made my chest tighten. Hey, he said softly, pausing at the bottom of the stairs. I was going to make some tea. Want me to make you a cup? The simplicity of the question caught me off guard, and I nodded before I could overthink it. That would be nice. Thanks. Kyle disappeared into the kitchen, and I followed after a moment. Unable to resist the pull of his presence, when I stepped into the room, he was already filling the kettle, his movements calm and deliberate. The soft hum of the boiling water filled the space, mingling with the faint clink of cups as he set them on the counter. Do you still like honey in yours? He asked, glancing over his shoulder at me. Yes, please, I replied, leaning against the counter as I watched him. It was casual, but I couldn't help noticing the way his movements were just a little too precise, as if he were trying to distract himself. We stood in silence for a moment, the space between us filled only by the sound of the kettle. I wanted to say something, to address the lingering tension that had hung in the air since earlier, but the words wouldn't come. When the tea was ready, Kyle handed me a mug and leaned against the counter opposite me. He took a small sip, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from the cup. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I tilted my head slightly, waiting for him to continue. "About not needing to meet anyone's expectations." He elaborated. "I guess I've spent so much time trying to be what other people want me to be, that I don't even know what I want anymore." His words hit me like a punch to the chest, and I sat, my mug down carefully, afraid that my shaking hands might betray me. "Kyle," I said softly, "it's okay to feel that way. You're still figuring things out, and that's normal. You don't have to have all the answers right now." He nodded slowly, his eyes finally meeting mine. "But what if I'm scared to figure it out? What if I don't like what I find?" The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tighten, and I had to take a deep breath before responding. "It's okay to be scared," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But you're stronger than you think. You don't have to face it all at once. Take it one step at a time and trust that you'll find your way." Kyle's lips twitched into a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," I admitted, my own smile tinged with sadness. "But you're not alone. I'm here for you, no matter what." For a moment he just looked at me, his gaze steady and searching. The vulnerability in his expression was almost too much to bear, and I felt a strange pull in my chest, an ache I couldn't explain. "Thanks," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to thank me," I replied, my own voice soft. "It's what family is for." Kyle nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful, as though there was something else he wanted to say. I waited, giving him the space to speak, but the moment passed, and he took another sip of his tea instead. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, weighted with unspoken thoughts and emotions that neither of us seemed ready to address. I wanted to reach out to offer him some kind of reassurance, but I wasn't sure what he needed or if he even knew himself. Finally, Kyle straightened up and set his mug on the counter. "I think I'm going to head to bed," he said, his tone light but tinged with an edge of hesitation. "Okay," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Good night, Kyle." "Good night," he replied, his gaze lingering on me for just a moment longer before he turned and disappeared up the stairs. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after he left, my thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and longing. The weight of the day pressed down on me, and I felt a strange mix of emotions: worry, tenderness, and something deeper that I couldn't quite name. As I climbed the stairs to my own room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something had shifted between Kyle and me, something unspoken yet undeniable. And no matter how much I tried to, I knew it would only grow stronger with time. But the story didn't end there. No, now the climax was coming. Let me tell you, the house was quiet again, but it felt different now. The air seemed heavier, as if the unspoken words between Kyle and me had seeped into the walls. Lingering in every corner, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft rustle of the trees outside doing little to calm the restless energy that churned within me. My thoughts kept circling back to Kyle, his expression, the vulnerability in his voice, the way his eyes had lingered on mine just a moment too long. There was something there, something I couldn't quite put into words, but it was undeniable. I rolled onto my side, closing my eyes in a futile attempt to will myself to sleep. But the silence only amplified my thoughts, and after what felt like hours, I gave up. The stillness was suffocating, and I needed to move. To do something to shake the restless energy from my body. Slipping out of bed, I padded quietly down the hallway. The soft glow of the moonlight spilled through the windows, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. I wasn't sure where I was going, but my feet seemed to move of their own accord, carrying me toward Kyle's room. His door was ajar, just enough for me to see the faint glow of a lamp spilling out into the hallway. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest as I debated whether to knock. But before I could decide, I heard his voice, soft, almost hesitant. "You can come in," he said, his tone calm, but with an edge of uncertainty. Swallowing hard, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Kyle was sitting on the edge of his bed, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. His hair was slightly messy, and the faint shadows under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping either. I noticed he was doing the same as when I came into his room the previous time, but this time it seemed like we both did not care that was happening. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. He shook his head, offering a small, tired smile. "Too much on my mind, I guess." Nodded, understanding all too well. Me too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us filled with the quiet hum of the lamp on his nightstand. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, but I wasn't sure how to break it or if I even wanted to. "I've been thinking," Kyle said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence, "about what you said earlier, about not needing to meet anyone's expectations." I stepped further into the room, closing the door behind me. "What about it?" Kyle hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. "It's just ... hard to believe sometimes. I feel like I've spent my whole life trying to be what other people want me to be. And I don't know how to stop." His words hit me like a wave, and I crossed the room to sit beside him on the bed. "Kyle," I said softly, placing a hand on his arm, "you don't have to figure it all out right now. It's okay to take things one step at a time." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and something deeper. Something that made my heart skip a beat. "What if I don't even know who I am without all of that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed his arm gently, my own emotions swirling as I tried to find the right words. "You're still you, Kyle. The expectations don't define you. You're more than that, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Kyle's gaze lingered on mine, and I could feel the weight of his emotions in the air between us. "You make it sound so simple," he said, his lips curving into a faint, wistful smile. "It's not," I admitted, my voice quieter now, "but that doesn't mean it's impossible. You're stronger than you think." For a moment the silence returned, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I could feel the warmth of his presence beside me, the soft hum of the lamp casting a gentle glow over the room. It was as if the rest of the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us in this shared moment. "Thank you," Kyle said finally, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "You don't have to thank me," I replied, my own voice soft. But even as the tension eased, I couldn't ignore the way his eyes lingered on mine, or the way my own heart raced in response. There was something unspoken between us, something I wasn't sure either of us was ready to confront. Kyle shifted slightly, his hand brushing against mine as he adjusted his position. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a shiver through me, my breath catching in my throat. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to our hands, where they now rested side by side. "You'll never have to find out," I replied, my voice trembling just slightly. Kyle looked up at me then, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't quite name. The room felt impossibly still, the air between us charged with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. And in that moment, I knew that nothing between us would ever be the same. Kyle's eyes held mine, steady and searching, and I could feel the weight of his gaze in every corner of my being. My heart raced, each beat loud and insistent, echoing in my ears as the moments stretched between us. I should have looked away, should have said something to ease the tension, to return us to the comfortable familiarity we'd always shared. But I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in the intensity of his expression, the vulnerability and yearning I saw there. Kyle shifted slightly, his hand brushing against mine again, and this time neither of us moved away. The contact was electric, a jolt that sent a shiver down my spine and left my skin tingling. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a warmth rise in my chest that I couldn't ignore. You've always been there for me, Kyle said softly, his voice low and laced with emotion. Even when I didn't know how to ask for help, I don't think I've ever told you how much that means to me. His words hit me like a tidal wave, and I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. Kyle, I said, my voice trembling slightly. You don't have to say that. You've always been important to me. I just want you to be happy. His lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. I don't know what happiness looks like for me yet, he admitted, his gaze dropping to where our hands still rested, fingers barely brushing. But I know that when I'm around you, I feel like I can figure it out. The vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache, and I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort him, to tell him that everything would be okay. But as I opened my mouth to speak, I found that the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached out, my fingers curling gently around his hand. Kyle looked up at me then, his eyes wide and filled with something I couldn't quite name. I don't want to mess this up, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. You're not going to mess anything up, I replied, my own voice soft and steady. Now let me help you with what you were busy with, Kyle. For a moment, neither of us moved, the silence between us heavy and charged. And then, slowly, Kyle leaned in, his movements hesitant, almost uncertain, as though he were waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. His lips brushed against mine, tentative and featherlight, and I felt my heart skip a beat. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant, but it sent a warmth spreading through me that I couldn't ignore. My hands moved instinctively, one resting on his arm while the other cupped his face, my fingers brushing against the faint stubble on his jaw. For a moment, the rest of the world fell away. There was no sound, no light, no time, just the warmth of his lips against mine, the steady thrum of my heartbeat, and the overwhelming sense of connection that filled this space between us. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting against each other, I felt a rush of emotions that I couldn't begin to untangle. There was confusion, gas, and fear, but also a deep, undeniable sense of rightness that I couldn't explain. I had helped him, and I could see that he enjoyed it, but still I felt some regret. Kyle, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. This is ... I know, he said quickly, his voice trembling slightly. I know it's complicated. I just ... needed you to know how I feel. My chest tightened at his words, and I exhaled shakily, my hands still resting against his arms. This isn't something we can take lightly, I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I'm not, he replied, his tone earnest. I've thought about this a lot. I've tried to ignore it, to push it away, but I can't. You're the one person who makes me feel like I can be myself. His honesty was both heartbreaking and comforting, and I felt a pang of guilt for the emotions that stirred within me. This was uncharted territory, and I wasn't sure where to go from here. But as I looked into his eyes, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't ignore what was happening between us. I care about you. Kyle, I said finally, my voice trembling slightly, more than you probably realize, but we need to be careful. We need to think about what this means. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. I know. I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is, I don't want it to go away. It doesn't have to, I said softly, my hands falling to rest in my lap. But we have to take it slow. We have to be sure. Kyle nodded again, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, he said quietly. The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. And I offered him a small, tentative smile. We'll figure it out, I said, my voice steady. Together. Kyle's lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The tension that had filled the room seemed to ease, replaced by a quiet understanding that while things might not be simple, we would face them together. As I stood to leave, Kyle reached out, his fingers brushing against mine in a silent gesture of connection. I looked back at him, my heart swelling with a mixture of emotions I couldn't fully name, and I squeezed his hand gently before stepping out of the room. The hallway felt quieter now, the weight in the air lighter somehow. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as I made my way back to my room, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't expected. Whatever came next, we would face it together. What do you think of what I did? Is it normal for a stepmom to help her stepson like that? Or is it wrong?